So thanks everybody. Welcome to Neuro Talk. This is something that I played around with last year and going into this year as well. Now this is our first chance to do it. It's virtual, and so it's open to a lot more people now, and what have you. And so mainly it's just a talk about autism and neurodiversity. A lot of what people don't necessarily know, or a lot of the information that is definitely helpful that they wouldn't necessarily have otherwise. I'm going to jump into it now by sharing my screen because if I don't go by a script, I'll just talk and talk and talk and I won't make any sense at all. But yeah, I'll do that now. Just one second. Um, just have time. Wait, share. Sorry. Now, jumping into this. If everyone can see this, just let me know. Okay, I'm gonna say that probably everyone can see it. So yeah, this is Neuro Talk, and it's yeah, jumping into it. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our Autism Newfoundland Labrador's virtual Neuro Talk, a space where people can learn about the autism community directly from the source, the autism community. Sorry about that. Tonight we've got three topics from three actually autistic panelists. One who all of them who happen to be autism self-advocates here in the province. Each 15-minute topic consists of two parts and reflect the interests of each panelist. Moving ahead like a bullet train, we'll introduce ourselves as panelists, as well as the topic we're covering and why that topic is so important to us. I'll start. My name is Terry Bursey. I'm 36 years young, a single full-time parent to a little boy named Max, a cook by trade, freelance writer by vocation, and all-around upstart by reputation. Aside from my autism self-advocacy and activism, I also dabble in producing plays, voice acting, podcasting, and recovering from burnout. I wonder why. The two-part topic I chose to cover is ableism and reconciliation. This topic is of particular interest for me for many good reasons, but perhaps most importantly due to my own lived experience as a late diagnosed autistic person. I spent my entire life on the receiving end of ableism without having the vocabulary to understand or identify what was going on. Nobody did, especially not the ableists. Words like weird were used in place of the mystery of my differences, and it's a mystery that would later be solved by my autism diagnosis. I want to help prevent that same sort of pain and injustice that I went through from happening to others. And since most ableism is based on not knowing more about someone's unique nature, teaching about neurodiversity and other intersectionalities is, hold on, the best way to not only prevent ableism, but to invite and foster reconciliation, making amends and finding forgiveness for acts of ableism, intentional or otherwise. Next up for introductions, my esteemed friend and colleague, Becky Furlong. Oh, Rebecca? Into my topic, and I'm sure Rebecca she'll have time to jump in after.
I hope so.
Yeah. Just one moment here now. Jumping into, I'm going to share my screen again, and then I'll jump into my topic. It's 15 minutes long. Each one's going to be about that if we've timed everything correctly. So jumping in right now. Share. Oh, there we go. Took me a second. All right, so neurotalk, and my topic is ableism and reconciliation. A colleague of mine once told me that hate is a strong word. At the time, I was referring to the ableism that the autism community in our province endures, calling us a hated people. Perhaps it wasn't the best word to use for the sake of keeping a light atmosphere in a room I couldn't read, but it remains the most apt word to use to describe the bullying, harassment, encouragement for self-alteration, and all-around marginalization of autistic people. In our first section of Neurotalk, we're delving into a heavy topic, but there are, maybe some strong words used, as well as some uncomfortable facts shared. But no hard truths will be sugar-coated. no voices will be dismissed as hyperbole, and hopefully no heads will be buried in the sand. After all, the second part of my topic isn't ableism, but reconciliation. And true reconciliation for a marginalized group can't occur if we pretend that the damage done is less than it actually is. In other neuro talks I've done, I've structured it around a journalist's checklist called the 5 Ws. It happens to be two C. Who, what, when, where, and why. In this talk, I'll only talk about the how. To get things rolling, let's start with defining ableism in relation to the autism community. This form of ableism, also known as neuroableism, is when any neurodivergent person is discriminated against for their autistic traits, and it comes in three main types. Direct ableism, when someone is vilified or limited for being autistic in a direct and unabashed manner, e.g., wanting to cure or treat autism as if it were a disease, avoiding autistic people, openly wishing autism didn't exist, etc. Next is trait-based ableism, when someone doesn't exactly know that someone is autistic, but vilifies or limits them based on their traits, behaviors, mannerisms, etc., or based on their underlying autism, e.g., ostracized or mistreating a classmate for being weird, clumsy, socially awkward, that sort of thing. Systemic ableism is the third one, and it's discrimination against autistic people that's woven into society, e.g., schools keeping autistic kids in other rooms, schools treating autistic kids as walking behavioral issues, rather than struggling to cope with the school's harsh environments or, the blanket standards that employers, who refuse to hire autistic employees or expect autistic employees to get along with everyone with the same ease as everyone else. An employer or organization refusing accommodations for the autistic employee, or that they need, and framing those accommodations as potentially problematic. Given those definitions, I'm sure many of you can recall an act of ableism that they've either suffered themselves as autistics or have perhaps inflicted upon others without necessarily being fully aware of the damage that they were inflicting. Autistic people are, after all, most likely to experience ableism being inflicted by their closest loved ones, like parents, grandparents, or spouses. This is due mostly because of widespread ignorance and misinformation surrounding autism, as well as how prevalent ableism is in society. Just as sexism and misogyny was far more common in the 40s, 50s, and 60s, but most people didn't really know they were sexist or misogynistic. Ableism is the most common form of discrimination today, though people don't know that they're being just as discriminatory as people were about gender in the past. This brings us to the how of ableism. One of the leading causes of widespread ableism is best explained by philosopher Miranda Flicker. It's a philosophical concept called epistemic injustice, or injustice that is widespread but exists outside the recognition of a system in society. She wrote that at its core, epistemic injustice is when a wrong is done to someone in their capacity as a knower. It happens when someone is unfairly treated in context of knowledge, when a person's ability to contribute or testify to their lived experiences is unjustly limited. This could be testimonial injustice, when the speaker is not believed or is given less credibility due to prejudice, such as women testifying in court or autistic people claiming they're treated unfairly, but ignored on the grounds that people mistake us both for exaggerating. Or more broadly, this word, hermeneutical injustice. The main reason why sexism in the 40s and 60s was so widespread until more and more conversations led to widespread improvement, it's when someone can't necessarily make sense of their lived experience as a marginalized person or can't effectively communicate them. Because the concepts or interpretive resources didn't exist in that society. Hold on. Just as many women didn't have the knowledge to know that they were being oppressed, many autistic individuals have no idea that what they've been suffering through was unjust, or that they aren't fully aware that they don't deserve to be treated the way they're being treated because it's all they've ever known or seen other people who are autistic go through. The thoughts to improve the situation or to stand up for themselves and their community don't have the resources to even come into being in the first place because it's a novel concept only realized when they hear conversations about it and form a community of their own to unite against the injustice. Uh, in the past century, that became known as feminism to fight against inequality. Nowadays, for the autistic community, that same fight for inequality is called the neurodiversity movement and autism acceptance. And boy, are we making big changes. In other words, autistics have always known that we've been treated unfairly, and we often behave exactly as one would expect an oppressed person to behave like. But society continues to discriminate against us because many of us don't have the resources to unite and stand up for change. Many of us can't even put the injustices that we've suffered through into words because the words to express it just aren't common enough to be known and put to good use. Just as knowing more about injustices and communities uniting to put an end to those injustices saw widespread improvement in terms of women's rights, so too does opening dialogues like these lead to mass improvement in autistic rights and helps to significantly reduce ableism against autistic people, regardless of their traits or support needs. Christy Dotson, another philosopher, expanded on Fricker's work with her own key additions. The first, epistemic exploitation, when marginalized people are expected to constantly explain how they've been victimized to dominant groups who often feign ignorance over and over, as a way of continuing the uneven dynamic for the sake of power or not having to improve the situation. In both sexism and ableism, it's also called weaponized incompetence. It's when a dominant group just waits for the storm to pass or excuses their poor behavior as not knowing the difference, even after they've been taught the difference. Like when your spouse does a poor job of washing the dishes on purpose, claims they didn't know, and in the end, you have to do the dishes yourself and nothing actually changes. This leads into the second concept that Dotson introduced, contributory injustice. When marginalized groups do have the concepts and vocabulary to make sense of the injustice they've experienced, but people dismiss them anyway out of sheer self serving motivations, wanting to maintain the status quo or their own influence over the oppressed person or group. We do see ableists actively fight back all the time, after all, and they're usually the first ones to try to actively silence autistic people from speaking about their autistic experiences or argue against us when we call out that injustice. Regardless of where any of it comes from, regardless of the how, it is still hate. It stems from a general dislike of autism as a difference. It stems from a society of individuals seeing us as less worthy, less capable, less lovable, and in extreme cases, less human. Imagine being a child, vulnerable, full of potential, and being taken to a hospital where instead of care, you're marked for death. This is the story of Spiegelgrund, one of the darkest chapters in medical history. It's not easy to talk about, but we must before moving on to reconciliation. After all, reconciliation is a strong word too, and it ought to be backed up by strong concepts. In the 1940s, under Nazi rule, Austria became a key site for something called euthanasia, though it was anything but merciful. The regime wanted to purify society by eliminating what they called lives unworthy of life. People who with disabilities, mental illnesses, or behaviors that didn't fit the Nazi mold of what the ideal German should be at the time. At the heart of all this was Am Spiegelgrund, a children's hospital on the outskirts of Vienna. It looked like a place of healing, but behind its doors, it was a center for systematic murder. Autistic kids who couldn't be taught to behave more like neurotypical kids, or what we now know as forced assimilation, were sent to gas chambers by the hundreds and thousands. While the autistic children at the so called hospital who could be trained to behave more like neurotypical children were allowed to keep their lives. Those children and all the children to come who are more trainable would be known as people with Asperger's syndrome. And I'm running a bit over my time, so I'm going to skip a little bit because it's actually really dark, and I think you guys have probably gotten the point by now. So, how do we reconcile? How do we make up for the widespread injustice that autistics have suffered in the past? And how do we stop that suffering today? Whether that's individual ableism, what happens in the past, or systemic ableism that occurs now in Newfoundland and Labrador in the year 2025 and beyond. First and foremost, listen to autistic voices. The path to reconciliation hinges on overcoming epistemic injustice, as mentioned earlier on. This means not just listening to us, but making sure we have access to information about the injustices and access to our peers to discuss what we've been through. It means neurotypical people being already prepared to make changes based on what they're hearing, even before they've heard us out, so that it's much harder for them to use weaponized incompetence as an excuse not to help. It involves making sure that what autistics are saying isn't dismissed as if we somehow must be exaggerating or that our unique perspectives mean we don't know what we're talking about compared to neurotypicals. What's talked about in terms of testimonial injustice. It means not just listening to what we have to say, but making changes based on what we say. It means creating a society where teasing a classmate for being weird is treated as seriously as a classmate teasing someone for, hold on, for another, based on race or religion. It means changes that are already swiftly happening right now across developed countries, such as outlawing separate classes for autistic kids in school, outlawing ABA, making it illegal to fire autistic employees due to any or all autistic traits and support needs, even if employers think those needs and traits interfere with the job. Yes, those are active endeavors in Canadian legislation as we speak. In many provinces, they've even already been passed. What an individual can do is apologize to the people they made fun of for being weird rather than think they don't need to because they didn't know they were autistic. It means making sure to be aware of the past tragedies autistic people endured as a people and making sure they aren't just remembered, but that they never happen again. They're doing it down at the States now. Basically, they're opening up talks about euthanasia again. So it's getting bad. And these discussions are more important now than ever. But the way things are now, the future looks brighter than you might think. That's the summarized quick version because I went over my time by about as much time as we were probably lagged up there. So sorry about all that, but I'm gonna hold on, stop share. I'm gonna bring it back up. There's me again, and that's essentially the very condensed version of what I've written up from my side of things. Is Rebecca on again now?
So I saw some messages that she put into Messenger, and she said, "I'm rebooted, but now I'm locked out. Can't get past the loading screen." That was at 7:16.
Ooh.
And she said at 7:08, "Let me try rebooting. Go ahead without me. I'll reboot."
Yeah, and she might be on for the second half too. If we jump in on the second half, because this meeting's about to wrap up, I think soon. We have 40 minutes, so we can go over our time a bit if you wanted to jump into yours instead, and we could probably move to Rebecca.
Yep. Yeah, I'll do mine.
Okay. What's our time at right now? Hold on. Okay, yeah, you got like roughly 15 minutes, so it should probably work out well.
Yeah, mine is a bit long though.
That's all right. We can take it as far as we can take it. We got to skip some parts towards the end. I'll let you decide which ones.
Common autism stereotypes in my personal experience. Even in today's world, autism stereotypes are pervasive and can be found everywhere from the media to employers to policymakers. And while in some cases there might be a kernel of truth, they can cause very real harm to autistic people and those around them. Often, when violent acts happen, it is believed that the suspects are autistic, when, according to scholarly papers, autistic people are more likely to be victims of violence rather than perpetrators. And oftentimes, autistic people won't be held criminally responsible simply because they're autistic, since law enforcers will often believe that the behaviors are just a part of autism. And because of this stereotype, even autistic people with no violent intentions will wrongfully become victims of police brutality, especially if they're not white. And Autism Ontario stated in 2023 that as a society, we must refrain from associating autism with acts of violence, and instead we must focus on addressing the various pervasive and harmful ideologies deeply embedded in our societal fabric. On a significantly lighter note, autistic people's special interests are often believed to be in a few subjects, such as trains, math, science, computer coding, and video games.
You got this.
And yeah, I've noticed that a lot of job programs and extracurricular activities are related to either STEM or gaming simply because of these stereotypes. But interests are much more diverse than this, such as how one widely cited study about it is called From Tarantulas to Toilet Brushes. Autistic people don't choose their interests, and if an interest is unemployable and not really conducive to social opportunities, such as a TV show, that's also okay. And here are mine.
Nice.
Even those who don't really know what autism is have likely seen representations of autistic people where they're shown with high intelligence or a special skill, such as calendar calculation, doing math problems in their head, drawing something after seeing it once, and playing songs without seeing them once. And despite unreliable numbers, savant syndrome is fairly uncommon despite what the media leads you to believe, and in my experience, first year psych class too. Though these skills are a positive part of autism and show talents as opposed to challenges, the media's emphasis on savant skills puts pressure on autistic people to find their magic skill. I mean, I wrote a nearly 300-page novel in 2 months, and I remember random things such as the exact vocal inflections in a Newfoundland power ad I heard as a small child and haven't heard since. But I don't consider these savant skills, and I don't know any autistic savants. If you search for clip art or other stock images of autistic people, they're almost always children. And since a lot of autism services cut off at a certain age, this perpetuates the belief that autism goes away after that age. And the lack of adult services is far worse for autistic adults without co-occurring physical or intellectual disabilities. And don't get me started on using IQ tests to apply for the disability tax credit. And another sub-aspect of this is that many believe autistic people are eternally childlike or childish, which can lead to infantilization. And mental age is an ableist concept, and you shouldn't judge an autistic person by what they like. It is believed that by some that all autistic males are either nerdy or creeps, while all autistic females are cute and quirky or heavy maskers, though to be fair, heavy masking is often what leads to late diagnoses. And this doesn't even take autistic, trans, or non-binary people into account. And regardless of gender, autism presents in every way possible. Even though I'm a cis female, I was diagnosed when I was in kindergarten since had no masking abilities whatsoever, as I openly overreacted to sensory stimuli. I stimmed a lot, had a deeper relationship to my Polly Pockets than many of my peers, in both senses of the term, and had no filter. I've never been able to relate to those AFAB autism traits lists since it's not always black and white, and the stereotypical and very binary male and female trait lists don't apply to every autistic person regardless of their gender, support needs, or age of diagnosis. As a Gen Z autistic female, I feel internal pressure to relate to the cute female influencer autism stereotype that started to overtake the white male savant one in recent years. Especially because I own a pair of mermaid pants, laugh at random things like a display of bug spray, long story, and have dragonfly wind chimes in my room, but I feel like being myself is better. The theory of vaccines causing autism was proposed in 1998 by Dr. Andrew Wakefield and has since been debunked, but still persists today. Thanks for nothing, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. In addition to this very false theory, many other random things have falsely been believed to cause autism, such as the internet and absence of worms, as well as dangerous and weird pseudoscientific cures like bleach and chicken nuggets. It's not true that non-speaking autistic people have no thoughts, since there's such a thing as AAC, and some non-speaking autistic people have written books. Separating autism into binary high and low functioning distinctions excludes endless gray areas, such as how, for an example, a speaking autistic person with a steady job, a relationship, and a university degree may have serious mental health issues or be unable to live independently, or how an intellectually disabled, non-speaking autistic person may live a full and happy life with affirming supports in place. It doesn't exist on a one-way sliding scale. As for mild autism, that sounds just as bad because autism is not barbecue sauce. And this implies that there's potentially maple chipotle autism or honey garlic autism. I was diagnosed as high functioning, so I felt internal pressure to conform to the label. By doing things perfectly, possibly coming up with a world changing discovery, and never showing any visible traits. However, more often than not, I feel low functioning, such as how I only ever want to talk about stuff I'm interested in and not like small talk. I've even had public meltdowns and screamed during medical appointments, and I can't live independently. And last year, when I did a needs evaluation to apply for the Go bus, I was even labeled as severely autistic. In the burden stereotype, the autistic person is presented as a tragedy or flat out pain for their families to deal with. These portrayals have taken a significant toll on my self-esteem because I'm afraid how this is how I am perceived by others, especially when I hear them mutter about it under their breath or complain about something I do. And I hope that autistic people aren't affected by these narratives, especially not in their lives.
1 second, Aaron. I only just wanted to mention that we're less than a minute in, so we can continue on the next Zoom too if the video feed gets cut out.
Okay,
I think we have 10 minutes leeway, but I'm not sure. I'm not sure how it goes. So if you cut out, we can
that
just.
was why I was talking really fast.
It's all good.
Yep. There's an important difference between tantrums and meltdowns, where tantrums involve wanting something and not getting it. Just go to your local Walmart and see. Like,
All right. It's I was not sure if Josh was jumping on there or not, but I wanted to be sure. I got participants open there now, so I'll know when they come in and out.
okay.
Confirm your speaking language. Save. And I think everything is the same as it was before. It is. The settings have transferred over. I don't
I
need to.
never got to finish, so
Yeah, absolutely. We're gonna. If you want, you can keep going because instead of having to wait on Josh, we got our half hour
okay.
saving it.
The quote, if you've met a one autistic person, you've met one autistic person is more than true because even though I've met lots of wonderful autistic people, such as the ones in this panel, I've had fights with some and others have bullied me for my interests. It's a very common myth that's even spread by self-help books by and for autistic people that every autistic person will automatically become best friends with each other. When lumping people together solely based on diagnosis doesn't always help, as for example, there's bound to be trouble when one autistic person is bothered by particular sounds and those sounds are another autistic person's stim. Autistic people have no empathy. This simply isn't true since I've met other autistic people who care very much about the feelings of others to the point where almost like Rogue from X-Men, they'll absorb the other person's feelings. This is often why I frequently ask someone if they're okay if they seem quiet or stressed. Autism is a monolith. A lot of autistic experiences are overgeneralized online and sometimes in real life, when all autistic people experience things very differently, hence why it's called a spectrum. An
Mhm.
autistic person may be hypersensitive or having an extreme dislike of sensory stimuli. For example, I really don't like the sounds of coughing, alarms, clanging dishes, or people talking over each other, people touching me to get my attention, or the smell of eggs, and it causes me to feel dysregulated beyond normal annoyance, even though I'm told I should just deal with it. Or they can be hyposensitive or not feeling any sensitivity, such as how a few years ago my best friend, who is also autistic, wanted to order the NFOD wigs, the ones you need to sign a waiver for, have wing in it, and how I love scented items such as candles and shampoos. I love the idea of sensory regulation, quiet rooms, and wish they were more common. That purple thing there is an example of one.
Mhm.
In addition to the typical sight, hearing, smell, touch, taste senses, there's also proprioception, knowing where your body is in space, interoception, knowing what your body needs internally, and vestibular balance. These senses are also impacted by autism as I am clumsy due to my poor proprioception and vestibular issues that still cause me to walk on my toes to this day. And yes, people ask all the time. And I sometimes go hungry or without a trip to the bathroom for a while due to issues with interoception. I also struggle with motor tasks. For example, I love to draw, and even though I generally use an iPad to draw to make everything more streamlined, the drawings turn out very childlike. An example of one of my drawings can be seen there. And if I ever learned to drive, I'd probably cause a multi-car collision. Now, Only doctors and other professionals are experts in autism. No matter how much training a neurotypical practitioner has, there's no such way for a Freaky Friday situation to happen in real life yet. So a neurotypical expert will never know what it's actually like to be autistic. A motto of the disability community is nothing about us without us. If you consider all of the pseudoscience being spread about autism, some of which is mentioned in this very slideshow, autistic people are the real experts. And if you're a neurotypical professional, you can be a better expert by listening to autistic voices, particularly BIPOC and gender diverse ones. Thanks for listening.
Yay!
Yay!
That was so cool.
Yeah.
And you did so well too. Like I think I might have stumbled over my words more than you by a lot. Yeah, you did great. So I guess Rebecca, we can jump to yours, and then after, if we got time, we get to answer some questions and what have you about.
So hi everybody. For
Hi.
those who don't know me, I'm Rebecca. So Terry and I serve together on the board of directors over at ASNL. We're also part of the administration team for a group on Facebook that is Autism Newfoundland and Labrador. If you're not on that group yet, I highly recommend that you get on it. We're answering people's questions about autism every single day. One of the common questions that comes up is how do I diagnose? How do I get a child diagnosed? The bad news is if you have a child trying to get them diagnosed, the wait time can be anywhere between 2 to 5 years, unless you decide to go private, which case is going to cost you anywhere in the range of several $1,000s. If you're an adult getting diagnosed, that's not your thing. You probably will have to go the private road. Very, very unfortunate. So many people are lacking that access to diagnosis. For one thing, it deprives people of the ability to access what's called autism services. It also leaves people questioning, well, am I really autistic or is my child really autistic? And they almost like they're not really part of the community, or that no one will take them seriously as part of the community without the official diagnosis. The good news is that most autism advocates will consider self-diagnosis to be valid. But if you want services, you're going to have to get the official diagnosis. So once you get it, hope you manage to get it, then it begs the question of what's next. And sadly, there's not a whole lot that comes next. We don't recommend ABA in our group. That is one of the services that's offered, though. Speech therapy is offered, but up until the Janeway, up until your child goes to kindergarten, and then they age out of the program at the Janeway. Then you would have to send your child privately to speech therapy and it costs them $1 an hour. They will continue to receive some SLP at school, but you have to consider the size of the schools. I mean, my son is in a school with over 700 kids, and you can imagine how many neurodivergent children are in that school. And even kids who aren't neurodivergent, they still need speech therapy. So to say that there's a high demand for that service is putting it very, very lightly. You may also want to see if you can qualify for the disability tax credit. You can apply for this as an adult. If you're applying as an adult, you also get them to backdate your credit for 10 years, only up for 10 years. Beyond that is kind of a lost cause, sadly, but at least the rules have changed. So previously, autism was one of the things that you would get approved for with the disability tax credit, but there have been a lot of changes, and they look now at your executive functioning, and that's why a lot of people with autism or ADHD can qualify now under the new rules. There's also the disability savings program. So if you get your official diagnosis and then you also qualify for the disability tax credit, then you apply for the disability savings account. And so what it is your contribute funds into this account, and the government is going to match your contribution. So it's best to match out the contribution for the year every year if you can. Even if you can't, it's still good to contribute what you can. The caveat though is you have to be really careful about when you withdraw that money. You can find more information about that on the Canada government website. But basically, if you withdraw the money too soon, the government will claw back their portion of the contribution. So, like I said, you really be careful with all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, perfect. So, I wanted to ask you a question first. In regards to adult diagnosis and what have you, are there any more or less ways that you could do it in a very like more or less circumvent that system? Because I know, like, when it came to my own diagnosis, it wasn't technically an official diagnosis, and that it went in a way that circumvented the system. I essentially got a second opinion about my son's diagnosis. I was telling you about that before, and the
Yeah.
pathologist, well, they were a pathologist and a psychiatrist, and like their resume was like yay thick. Just it was like, I have to inform you, sir, unless in case no one has told you yet, you are an autistic man. I was like, oh,
So that's the thing. A lot of people are realizing that they're autistic when they have an autistic child. A lot of autistic children do have at least one autistic parent. But having said that, that's not always true because my parents actually aren't autistic. I think my grandparents may have been, but my grandparents are also dead a very long time. So I unfortunately never got the chance to ask them that question. But it just is really interesting, though, how many people are realizing that, yeah, I'm probably autistic. He or she gets this from me. But they probably weren't diagnosed because autism diagnosis prior to early 2000s was a really, really rare thing. I was diagnosed in 1994, and it's only because I was literally almost bullied to death. I didn't have any friends in school. I was getting bullied all the time, and I wound up in a psychiatrist's office. Otherwise, they couldn't care less. As long as you did well academically, they didn't care. They didn't care how much that people were struggling with. And and the thing is, too, nobody knew what autism was back then either, because even when I got diagnosed, so I was 12, my teachers had never heard of it. My school principal had never heard of it. Even my speech therapist had never heard of it. Now, if you think about that, a speech therapist not knowing about autism, I mean, they'd be laughed out of the profession now. But back then, that was the reality of it. Back in the 1990s, it just nobody knew what it was, especially here in Newfoundland. So there are a lot of people who were never diagnosed, and now they can't get diagnosed because one thing, the cost of the private assessment, and secondly, we've learned to mask by the time we become adults. So, like, people always say to me, well, you don't seem autistic, or I never would have thought you're autistic. Well, yeah, there's probably a good reason why a 42-year-old woman doesn't resemble your 5-year-old nephew. Because I've had time in those, over 40 years to learn how to mask. I can test for neurotypical, but I don't ever feel that way. And, these people have no idea what I've struggled with and what I've been through.
I've never been able to mask. I was diagnosed in, I want to say, I was diagnosed in 2006. I was born in 2000. So, and the biggest red flag was that I walked on my toes then, and I still do now.
Yep.
Yeah, so I was in kindergarten, and it was all a blur because not only was I so young, but I just kept getting shuffled around to all these places in the Janeway and stuff. And I had no idea what was going on. And a few years ago, my mom even told me that I should have been diagnosed, that they should have sought out a diagnosis earlier in my life.
Yeah, that's something I wish I had in my life.
It's really funny about, sorry. I just want to say it's really funny about the toe walking. I did it, but if you think about people who study ballet for a long time, being able to walk on your toes is something that they take years to develop. But when you have a a neurodivergent person, they walk on their, they say, "Oh no, you're not supposed to walk like that."
Yeah, people have made ballerina jokes towards me for years, even though my time in dance classes was mercifully brief. And and I remember at one point I had to wear these horrible socks in my sleep to correct them. Like those
Oh
arm
wow,
sleeve thingies? They were these long white
yeah,
socks that went up to your knees, and they had
wow.
these long Velcro bands that were supposed to straighten your tendons out. That I
Did it
hated
work?
No, I took them off quickly because I hated the way they felt. Like they were,
Proper thing.
With me, actually, I got calluses on the balls of my feet or like my toes, and I developed them really
same
young
here.
because I would toe walk, but only in ways that were kind of like covert. Like I had to hide it a bit. So my grandmother was like, she was strict about stuff like that, right? She's like, "Don't do that, Terry. You're making noise in the house." And so when I do it while I was walking upstairs. Whenever I'd walk upstairs, my heels would be hovering a bit, right? And whenever I was alone, of course, I'd just toe walk around the house because it felt awesome. And like over time it just like blistered and cracked and stuff. It was like, oh.
Yeah, yeah,
So I
yeah,
did.
and
Oh, go ahead, sorry.
I did physio and stuff to correct it, but I don't think it ever worked.
Yeah, sometimes it won't work. um Jim, did you have any questions you wanted to chime in with? We didn't have Josh come back to this one. He might have encountered the same issue that.
No, I'm very impressed by it, right? And it's very educational for me, right? Just to get that neurodiverse, the autistic perspective to it, because I'm not autistic, but I teach a lot of autistic kids, right? So for me, I would say I've got ADHD, whether I had it previous to my car accident and brain injury and acquired ADHD. Um, Understanding what autistic individuals go through, I think, is really important for the the neurotypical population, because as you guys have said in this talk, most neurotypicals have no idea. So the only way we can get them to understand and come to terms with it is to educate them, right? Because
Yeah,
I think that in any, I'm not going to say conflict, but in any disparity there, you have to educate each other on each other's point of view and where each other stands, and then come to a point and how can we make this better for everybody, especially when it's about our children, right? Everybody should want the best for these children. So
Yep.
understanding where each other stands and then coming together to solve this issue where these kids don't feel isolated, they don't feel left out, they don't feel that they don't belong, because that's one of the biggest tragedies for me in teaching this program, is just having these kids say to me, you know what, I can't do this because they won't let me, they don't understand, they say that I'm misbehaving. And to me, that kills me, because these kids are so good, so talented, right, and have so much potential, but if you take away their self-confidence, they're not going to be able to achieve things.
Exactly, Jim.